The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, not by certified mail, not through a lawyer. They were sitting on the kitchen table when I came home from buying groceries. 48 years of marriage reduced to 23 pages and a yellow sticky note. "I can't do this anymore, Frank." That was all she'd written. No argument, no explanation, no dramatic goodbye, just a sentence. At 77 years old, I stood in the kitchen of the house we'd bought when Jimmy Carter was president and stared at those words until the ice cream in my grocery bag melted onto the floor. 3 months later, the house was hers. The savings were divided, the retirement accounts were drained by legal fees, and I was sleeping in the back seat of a 12-year-old Buick parked behind a grocery store. The hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing that almost every memory I had lived inside a life that no longer existed. Then a man I'd never met called me. He said a dead biker had left me a key, and everything changed. Not because the key unlocked something valuable, but because it unlocked a mystery that would make me question everything I thought I knew about failure, purpose, and what it means to leave something behind. The key belonged to a store, an old hardware store, and the man who left it to me was a member of the Hells Angels I barely remembered. The strange part? I hadn't spoken to him in over 50 years, yet somehow he had chosen me, and I had no idea why. The town was called Mercer Falls. Population declining. Main Street looked like a photograph someone had forgotten in a drawer. The hardware store sat at the far end. Its faded sign creaked in the wind. Mercer Hardware. The paint was peeling. Several windows were boarded up. The brickwork had cracked. The place looked exhausted, like it had spent decades holding itself together. The attorney handed me a ring of keys. His name was Raymond Cole. I nodded. The name stirred something distant, a memory buried under half a century. A skinny kid with long hair, a motorcycle, a fight outside a gas station. Nothing more. Why would he leave this to me? The attorney shrugged. He never explained. That answer bothered me. Dead people usually leave reasons. Raymond hadn't. Only a key, and a building nobody wanted. The front door groaned when I opened it. Dust floated through shafts of sunlight. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness. Old tools hung on walls. Boxes sat exactly where someone had left them years ago. The air smelled like wood, oil, rust, and time. I stood there completely alone. No wife, no children, no house, no plan. Just an abandoned hardware store and questions. Then I noticed something odd. The cash register drawer was open. Inside sat a single envelope. My name was written on it. Frank. Nothing else. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph. 2 teenage boys standing beside a motorcycle. One was Raymond. The other was me. Written on the back were 6 words. "You forgot. I never did." And suddenly I knew this wasn't an accident. But it raised a much bigger question. What exactly hadn't he forgotten? The first week I spent cleaning, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. The apartment above the store was small but livable. A bed, a stove, a table, a window overlooking Main Street. Better than a Buick. Each day I uncovered another layer of the store. Old inventory, receipts, ledgers, photographs. Nothing valuable. Nothing that explained why Raymond had remembered me. Then I discovered a locked filing cabinet. The key was taped underneath a shelf. Inside were hundreds of folders. Not business records. People. Each folder had a name, and every folder contained notes, dates, addresses, handwritten observations. At first, I thought Raymond had been keeping customer information. Then I opened one labeled Sarah Thompson. Inside was a receipt. 100 pounds of nails, paid in full. Except a note attached to it read, "Lost husband. Couldn't afford roof repairs. Don't let her know I covered the balance." I opened another, then another, then another. The same pattern appeared. Quiet assistance, anonymous help. Years of it. Thousands of dollars worth of it. Maybe more. But why keep records, and why hide them? The mystery only deepened. A few days later, an elderly woman entered the store. She looked around slowly, as if visiting a grave. "You must be Frank." I nodded. She smiled sadly. "I heard Raymond passed." "You knew him?" She laughed softly. Everyone knew Raymond. There was something in her voice, something complicated. I told her about the folders. Her eyes filled with tears. Then she pointed towards the ceiling. "That man kept our family alive." She explained that 20 years earlier, her husband had died unexpectedly. Their furnace failed during winter. She couldn't afford repairs. A crew arrived the next morning. The furnace was fixed. No bill ever came. She spent years trying to learn who paid. Only after Raymond's death did she discover it was him. "Why would he hide it?" I asked. The woman smiled. "He wasn't helping people for credit." Before leaving, she paused. "Look in the basement." Then she walked away, leaving me with another question. What was in the basement? The basement door was hidden behind shelving. The stairs creaked beneath my weight. At the bottom sat dozens of metal cabinets. Inside were cassette tapes. Hundreds of them, each labeled with names. I found an old tape player. The first recording crackled to life. An anxious voice filled the room. A young man, scared, confused, talking about losing his job. Raymond's voice occasionally responded, calm, patient, listening, not lecturing, listening. The tape lasted nearly an hour, then another, then another. People discussing addiction, grief, bankruptcy, divorce, loneliness. For decades, strangers had come to this hardware store not just for tools. They came because Raymond listened. The toughest biker in 3 counties had secretly become a counselor for half the town. Nobody knew the full extent of it, not even me. Yet another question emerged. How many lives had passed through this place? The answer arrived one person at a time. A teacher, a mechanic, a waitress, a pastor, a retired police officer. Each told a story, different details, same theme. At some point in their life, Raymond appeared. Not dramatically, quietly. He paid a bill, made a phone call, provided a reference, connected someone with work, sat beside them during grief, never asking for anything in return. One afternoon, a former judge arrived carrying a photograph. It showed Raymond standing beside a teenage boy. "That's me," the judge said. He explained that he had been arrested at 16. Most people had written him off. Raymond hadn't. The biker showed up every week, helped him find work, made sure he finished school. The judge stared at the photograph. People assumed he was trouble. He shook his head. Truth is, he spent his life saving people from trouble. I found myself thinking about my own assumptions, about how easily we'd all judged him. Leather vest, motorcycle, rough language, case closed. Except we had been wrong, very wrong. And somehow Raymond had known that one day I'd need to learn that lesson. The question was why? Why me? Then the threat arrived. Not in the form of a villain, just business. A development company wanted the property. Main Street was changing. The hardware store occupied valuable land. The offer came with deadlines, permits, lawyers, economic arguments, practical arguments. The building required repairs. The roof leaked. The wiring was outdated. I couldn't afford restoration. The town council wasn't hostile. They were realistic. The store had been losing money for years. Keeping it open made little sense. For the first time since arriving, I considered leaving. Maybe they were right. Maybe Raymond's story ended with him. Maybe some things simply fade away. Then I discovered one final cabinet, and everything changed again. Inside were maps, not geographical maps, community maps, hand-drawn diagrams connecting people. A widow linked to a plumber, a veteran connected to a landlord, a teenager connected to a scholarship donor. Hundreds of relationships, hundreds of acts of quiet intervention. Raymond had spent decades introducing people to people, building invisible bridges. He wasn't helping individuals, he was helping an entire community stay connected. The hardware store had never been the real mission. The people were. And suddenly, I understood why losing the building felt wrong. Because the building wasn't a store. It was a lighthouse. People just didn't realize it. The problem was that nobody knew this evidence existed, and the demolition hearing was only 3 weeks away. News travels quickly in small towns. Faster than paperwork, faster than lawyers. Within days, people began appearing. At first, there were only a handful, then dozens, then more. Nobody organized it, nobody coordinated anything. They simply came. A woman brought letters Raymond had written. A man brought photographs. Someone else brought records of scholarships he secretly funded through local businesses. Stories filled the store. Every day, every chair occupied, every corner alive. I watched strangers discover that they had all been touched by the same man, a man many had misunderstood. One evening, an elderly farmer entered carrying a weathered notebook. He placed it gently on the counter. "Raymond saved my farm." Then he walked away. No speech, no drama, just truth. The notebook joined hundreds of other pieces of evidence, proof that one ordinary man had quietly held together parts of an entire town. And for the first time, I wasn't alone. The hearing room overflowed. People stood in hallways, outside doors, along walls. The developers presented facts. The building was old, maintenance costs were high, economics mattered. They weren't wrong. Then residents began speaking, one by one. A teacher, a veteran, a nurse, a judge, a widow, a mechanic, a former addict. Nobody talked about property values. They talked about Raymond, about what happens when places that connect people disappear, about how communities survive, not through buildings, through relationships. And this building had created thousands. The council listened for hours. When the final vote came, the room fell silent. The store would remain, not as a business, as a community resource center, a place dedicated to continuing Raymond's work. People cried, including me. But the biggest surprise came afterwards, because there was still one mystery left unsolved. The letter, the one hidden behind the loose brick in Raymond's office, the one addressed to whoever came next. I opened it that night. The handwriting was shaky. Age had reached them by then. The letter wasn't long, only a single page. It read, "If you're reading this, the building survived longer than I did. Good, that means people cared. Here's something I learned. Most folks think purpose is a thing you find. It isn't. Purpose is something you practice. You notice who's struggling. You remember what they said. You make one call. You show up. You carry a little weight for someone when they can't carry it themselves. That's all. Not every day changes a life, but every life changes one day. And when that day arrives, I hope somebody is there. Maybe that's you now." Raymond. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Not because the words were complicated, because they were simple. Simple enough to be true. I stayed, not because I had nowhere else to go. For the first time in years, I had somewhere to be. We converted part of the store into a gathering space. The old counters remained. The shelves remained. So did Raymond's maps. People came for coffee, advice, introductions, conversation. Sometimes they came just to sit. I listened more than I talked, the way Raymond had. Months turned into years, and every so often, someone would point to Raymond's photograph hanging near the entrance. They would smile, then tell a story nobody else had heard before, another life touched, another quiet kindness uncovered. The mystery never truly ended, because kindness echoes longer than records can track, longer than buildings can stand, longer than names survive. I lost a marriage, I lost a house, I lost nearly everything I thought defined my life. Yet somehow, in an abandoned hardware store left by a biker most people misunderstood, I found something far more valuable. I found purpose. And on quiet evenings, when the sun settles over Mercer Falls and the store lights glow against the darkening street, I sometimes think about Raymond, not the biker people saw, the man they missed. The man who spent decades helping others without asking to be remembered. Then I look around the room. at neighbors talking, at strangers becoming friends, at people carrying a little weight for one another. And I realized something. The greatest lives are often invisible while they're being lived, but if they're lived well enough, their kindness remains long after they're gone, like a light left burning in a window, waiting for the next weary traveler to find their way home.